it's that simple. Just I don't want to talk. I don't want to be speaking division of myself, but I'm gonna just leave it at that. But I just try to go out there every single night and give my teammates everything that
Has Harden become a liability? Yes, he has. James Harden is no longer a top-level player. The James Harden of Houston no longer exists. That player is gone. His signature step back is no longer reliable. He can no longer out-dribble opponents, and he no longer draws the same fouls in his favor. James Harden was so bad, so awful last night, that it almost seemed intentional. Ever since we acquired him, everyone was expecting the James Harden of Houston, but that player is no longer here. The great James Harden was surpassed by two players named Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. The year was 2020, and the Houston Rockets had just been eliminated in the bubble by the Los Angeles Lakers. James Harden had just finished the postseason averaging 30 points per game, and his future in Houston seemed uncertain. While Harden may have been one of the league's best players, when the playoffs rolled around, his success was limited. He wanted a change, and once he was traded to Brooklyn in January 2021, his game seemed to take a step back. Gone were the days of scoring 30 points effortlessly. As a point guard, Harden became a more creative player, taking on a secondary role behind his two superstar teammates. For the first time in his career, he dealt with a series of major hamstring injury issues, and by the time the 2021 postseason rolled around, those injuries ended his run. The following season, 2021 to 2022, brought more of the same. Harden's game did not return to his Houston Rockets level. He was passive and unaggressive on the court. When he was traded to Philadelphia, fans hoped he would return to his former glory. But not even a change of scenery could revive the beard, leaving many wondering, what happened? How could a player go from an effortless scorer averaging 30 points in 2020 to struggling to average 20 in the playoffs in 2022? What caused Harden's precipitous decline in offensive production? Many onlookers were quick to blame his numerous recent injuries, but the story goes deeper than that. Hamstring injuries may have gotten attention, but they don't tell the whole story. Here's the real story behind James Harden's decline. While James Harden's hamstring injuries are grabbing headlines now, the star point guard has dealt with this injury in the past. During his MVP campaign in 2017-88, Harden suffered a grade 2 hamstring injury against the Lakers in December 2017, which sidelined him for 2 weeks. It was the most serious injury of his career up to that point, and while he may have recovered, the wear and tear on his legs was only just beginning. The peak of James Harden's offensive game came during his final years in Houston between 2017 and 2020. During this time, Harden averaged 30 points per game in 2017-80, 36 in 2018, 2018-19, and 34 in 2019-20. All of these numbers led the league by a wide margin, giving him 3 consecutive scoring championship titles. James played in an offensive system that relied heavily on isolation plays, forcing him to use his speed and dribbling moves to get past opponents. This method worked at the time, but it put enormous pressure on Harden to use all of his energy on offense, or else his team would have little chance of winning. A clear example of this occurred during the 2018-19 season, when fellow star player Chris Paul suffered a hamstring injury and missed 34 games. James had to step up and have monster scoring nights to keep his team afloat in terms of record. While it was incredible to witness such an extraordinary scoring season at the time, this style of play, coupled with his average of 37 minutes per game, was affecting his future and demanding tremendous effort from him. James Harden's last playoff run with the Houston Rockets in 2020 saw him average 30 points per game. Their typically dominant numbers culminated in an unfortunate second-round exit, and by then Harden had had enough of his team. Harden's patience with the Rockets organization had run out. He believed his chances of winning a ring would be better elsewhere. He requested a trade in November 2020, and what followed was surprising. The Houston Rockets began their 2020-21 season with their superstar looking a little different. Harden appeared overweight, looked sluggish in play, and was listless on both ends of the court. While this infamous image may have been shocking at first glance, it has been greatly exaggerated due to the different angles. He looks much thinner than initially perceived. This did not stop social media from going viral with the story, and while reports about his weight were contradictory, what was clear was that James Harden looked listless on the court, a far cry from his previous self. Why? Aside from the obvious answer that he was frustrated, Harden and the Rockets, like most other NBA teams, were coming off the shortest offseason in league history. The Rockets' final playoff game took place on September 2020, and the following season began just 3 months later. This short 90-day offseason likely took a toll on Harden's conditioning combined with his growing frustration. This paints a clearer picture of why his final season with Houston was so unusual. A visibly disgruntled James Harden openly expressed his desire to leave the Rockets in several post-game press conferences. In his final 8 games with Houston during the 2020-21 season, Harden averaged 25 points and 10 assists per game. Compared to the previous season, this represented a double-digit drop in his scoring average, although there was a 3-assist increase in his playmaking. Harden was slowly changing his offensive approach, favoring passing over scoring. In the past, he was known for dominating the ball and being a prolific scorer, but now shooting was no longer his priority. On January 14, 2021, James Harden was traded to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for a valuable package of first-round picks. His main goal was, of course, to win a championship. While Harden valued his scoring titles, MVP award, and first-team All-NBA selections, he knew his legendary career needed a ring to be complete. In Brooklyn, Harden's new, more passing-focused approach thrived alongside superstars like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. James quickly adapted to the point guard role. Irving wanted Harden to take on that role, and Harden was willing to make the sacrifice. During the 2020-2021 season, number 13 averaged 16 shots per game. In comparison, in the previous 2 seasons, he had shot 22 and 24 times per game, showing a noticeable decrease in his shooting volume. However, these statistics went unnoticed by many. Harden let Kyrie and KD take most of the shots, a strategy that seemed to be working. While his numbers weren't as impressive as they were in his years in Houston, it was clear that Harden was still a superstar. His first 2 months with the Nets were extraordinary. Harden won Player of the Month awards in February and March, leading his team to numerous victories. His offense, while no longer based on one-on-one isolation, was still lethal. Harden was among the league's best in assists per game, proving that his creative ability was still intact. The Brooklyn Nets were the heavy favorites to win the NBA Finals. They just needed to stay healthy to succeed. However, everything changed in late March 2021, when issues arose with Harden's health. From January 16, 2021 to March 23, 2021, James Harden missed only 1 game with the Brooklyn Nets. There were no concerns about his health, and his future as a superstar seemed secure. The only game he did not play was against the Washington Wizards due to a left thigh bruise. Other than that, Harden was healthy. On March 31, 2021, against the Houston Rockets, Harden suffered a right hamstring injury during a routine layup, marking the start of a series of injuries to that area. After missing 2 games, he returned on April 5 against the New York Knicks, only to re-aggravate his injury. This second injury sidelined him for a month, beginning an arduous recovery process that included a significant setback. On April 20, 2021, it was reported that Harden had suffered a setback in his hamstring recovery. What were initially minor concerns about his health quickly escalated into serious issues. With their return scheduled for the 2021 playoffs, there was little time left for the Nets' Big Three to develop the necessary chemistry. This sudden, harsh reality hit James Harden head-on, and many began to wonder why he had fallen victim to such a persistent hamstring injury. Throughout his illustrious career, Harden had always put up impressive numbers, but had also been the subject of criticism for his off-court activities. During his final year with the Rockets in late 2020, Harden missed the start of training camp and was reportedly seen partying with his close friend, rapper Lil Baby. Nights out became a common occurrence, a fact that Houston management was well aware of. One former Rockets assistant commented that whenever Harden's team had multiple days off, it was almost a given that Harden would fly to another city to party. Popular rappers like Lil Durk, Meek Mill, and Lil Baby would frequently spend time with him in Houston, and Harden would often spend entire nights in the studio with them, only to go straight to practice. The Houston Rockets organization overlooked these habits because, regardless of his nocturnal lifestyle, Harden still performed at a phenomenal level on the court. He could get little to no sleep and still dominate his opponents the next day. Once Harden suffered these injuries, it became harder for him to stay in shape. Cardio became a challenge with an injured hamstring, which made it easier to gain weight since he couldn't run at a normal speed. This affected Harden even more. He started the 2020-21 season with a poor level of conditioning, and now with the injury, he couldn't regain his fitness. Maybe the years of late-night partying had caught up with him. Perhaps the short offseason played a role in his sudden rash of injuries. What was clear was that Harden, known throughout his career as an injury-resistant Iron Man, was now facing his biggest health crisis. James Harden played 2 more games in the 2020-21 regular season with Brooklyn, facing minutes restrictions and resting the final game. Even though injuries dominated the headlines, the consensus view in the NBA world was that Harden was still his old self. The Brooklyn Nets, having dealt with injuries to their 3 stars, entered the playoffs with sky-high expectations. The championship seemed within reach. James Harden had a chance at the ring that had eluded his career up to that point. The best and worst moments of his time with the Nets unfolded during the 2021 playoffs, which began with great anticipation. Brooklyn earned the 2nd seed and faced an injury-plagued Celtics team in the first round. Harden stepped up, playing like a superstar and dispelling any doubts about his physical issues. The bearded man averaged 27 points per game with 10 assists, culminating with a 34-point triple-double in a decisive Game 5. Harden looked confident and agile, fitting in perfectly as the shot creator alongside Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. It was a phenomenal performance that allowed the Nets to win the series in 5 games, leaving fans elated about the future of their star trio. It seemed that the month of rest and recovery had benefited Harden, who was motivated to help his team get the ring. An overwhelming majority of the basketball world chose Brooklyn as the favorite to win the title. After more than a decade of playoff failures, it looked like the Harden curse would finally be broken. The bearded man was on his way to a ring. All the team needed was to keep the momentum going and get past the Milwaukee Bucks in the 2nd round. However, everything changed dramatically. In Game 1 against the Bucks, the Nets came in eager to dominate, but it took just 20 seconds for their bubble to burst. On a routine layup attempt, Harden drove into the crease, kicked the ball out, and limped out, holding the back of his thigh. It turned out to be another hamstring injury. On the same right leg, James Harden suffered a grade 2 hamstring strain, although the severity of the injury was not known to the public at the time. The Brooklyn Nets initially classified this injury as right hamstring tightness, a much less serious condition than a grade 2 strain. It is unclear why Brooklyn initially downplayed the severity of the injury. The public wouldn't know the true extent of the injury until after the series concluded. The haunting image of Harden walking off the court not only represented the threat of losing a ring, but it marked the beginning of a chain of events that would lead him to make one of the worst decisions of his career. Keep playing. The Nets were unfazed in Games 1 and 2, destroying Milwaukee with Durant and Irving carrying the load. However, this excitement came to a screeching halt in Game 4, when Kyrie suffered an ankle injury while attempting a layup. The health of the star trio was deteriorating, and Kyrie's injury put enormous pressure on Harden. With the team turned into a one-man show with Durant, Harden, eager to win, knew he had to get back on the court no matter the circumstances. Before Game 5, shocking headlines emerged. James Harden, playing with a grade 2 hamstring strain, was making his comeback. An injury that normally requires 4 to 8 weeks of recovery saw Harden back in just 10 days. Remember, the Nets initially reported that Harden was dealing with simple stiffness, when in reality he was dealing with a much more serious strain. No player should be returning to the court just 10 days after an injury of such magnitude. At some point, there was a lack of communication between Harden and the medical team. However, this triumphant return did not have a happy ending. Harden played in Games 5, 6, and 7 against Milwaukee, but recorded discouraging statistics. He averaged 14 points per game, with 8 assists, 30% shooting from the field, and 19% shooting from 3. These numbers were below his usual level. Looking more closely at the statistics, it is clear that Harden was nowhere near his usual self. He was just a shadow on the court. His only goal was to create plays and operate as a floor spacer for Kevin Durant. In a decisive Game 7, Harden recorded 22 points, 9 assists, and 9 rebounds, but shot just 5 of 17 from the field in a loss. A disappointing performance, but understandable given the circumstances. And just like that, Brooklyn's season was over. James Harden playing these final 3 games to help his team was an admirable decision, but it also demanded more of him than his already weakened legs could handle. Playing with a grade 2 hamstring injury was a catastrophic decision. The Nets calling it tightness in the hamstring only made matters worse. Harden played 45, 39, and 53 minutes in Games 5, 6, and 7 with an injured leg. His injury had not fully healed, and by playing through it, he further aggravated his hamstring. It was an unfortunate series of events. Harden had risked his career in a Game 7 that ended in defeat. Milwaukee beat Brooklyn and ended up winning the championship. The Nets' Big Three, who seemed destined for greatness, ended their first and only campaign together with a heartbreaking loss. Harden fans consoled themselves with the hope that, with an off-season to rest and recover, the Beard would quickly recover from this loss. What they didn't know was that this disaster was just beginning. The 2021 to 2022 season began with James Harden showing up to training camp overweight. Kevin Durant, his teammate and superstar, was shocked to see how bad Harden's conditioning was. It was unclear what the main reason was for Harden arriving out of shape. Some pointed to his questionable work ethic, and considering his history of partying, many believed that the blame was entirely on Harden. However, others argued that his right hamstring injury prevented him from losing weight, as getting in shape requires a lot of cardio work, something Harden was unable to perform at a high level due to his injury. Either way, regardless of whether they blamed Harden or his hamstring, one thing was clear: he needed to prove himself. The 2021 to 2022 season for Brooklyn was a disaster from the start. Kyrie Irving refused to get vaccinated, which sidelined him for much of the year. Even though it was a significant loss, Brooklyn remained hopeful. KD and Harden were more than ready to step up. The Nets opened the first 32 games with a 23-9 record, but that didn't dispel the doubts about James Harden. The Beard had his moments of brilliance, and he was still one of the best players in the league. However, the Harden that Houston fans were used to seeing seemed to have disappeared. It was no longer his right hamstring that was bothering him, but his left. He had a slight tightness in his left hamstring, but he was still playing and had no intention of sitting out. Also, many Brooklyn Nets fans were confused as to why James hadn't signed an extension yet. Harden was set to become a free agent in the summer of 2022 and claimed he hadn't signed with Brooklyn because he wasn't ready yet and was simply taking his time. Some believed his justification. Others began to wonder if Harden's eyes were looking elsewhere. The Beard was said to have mentioned to several people that he was interested in testing free agency, which baffled more than one onlooker. These concerns were put to rest when an even bigger issue arose with another Nets superstar, Kevin Durant. In a January 2022 game against the New Orleans Pelicans, Cade suffered a medial collateral ligament injury. This would put Durant out of action indefinitely, which meant that both Kyrie Irving, who couldn't play home games, and Kevin Durant, who had a knee injury, were now out. James Harden found himself with only a part-time Kyrie at his side, which infuriated him. He came to Brooklyn because he was tired of being the #1 option, and now it seemed like history was repeating itself. The Nets began to lose games quickly, and Harden's level of play began to decline. His left hamstring tightness did not improve. He had to carry the team alongside his two-star teammates in and out of the lineups. Rumors that the Beard wanted to go to Philadelphia began to mount, and although Harden denied it at first for fear of public criticism, he soon admitted it. James Harden wanted to be a Sixer. He wanted to reunite with his former Rockets general manager, Daryl Morey. He was fed up with Kyrie Irving not playing. He was tired of being the #1 option on offense, and his play on the court soon reflected his frustration. Harden gave up. He put in little effort on defense and looked listless on offense. He began missing games in February 2022 due to left hamstring tightness, sending the Nets into a tailspin. On February 10, 2022, this polarizing saga came to an end. James Harden was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. The trio, considered one of the best in history in terms of talent, only played 16 games together. Harden failed to win a ring in Brooklyn. His time as a Net lasted just over a year. Now he was in Philadelphia, paired with an MVP-caliber center in Joel Embiid. Harden seemed to be in a perfect situation. Once again, he had his favorite general manager Daryl Morey on his side and a talented roster around him. Expectations for the 2021 to 2022 season in Philadelphia were sky high, and it was time for the Beard to step up his game, and that's exactly what he did. James Harden made his debut with the Sixers and sat out the first few games to recover from his left hamstring tightness. But when it finally came time to play, he did it all. After the All-Star break, the Beard was back and setting the NBA world on fire. The Sixers opened 4-0 with James, and the Beard averaged 27 points per game with 12 assists and 7 rebounds, a marked improvement compared to his final season in Brooklyn. Harden turned back the clock and looked like an offensive superstar. Fans at the time were confused and began to wonder if Harden just played poorly in Brooklyn because he was unhappy, but that wasn't the case. Harden was playing well because he had been off for 3 weeks. He hadn't played since February 2, and he put on a Sixers jersey for the first time on February 25th. His hamstring tightness had been healing and his conditioning had improved, This wasn't the first instance of Harden playing well after being rested. The same situation occurred in late December 2021, when he was in Brooklyn. During that time, Harden was under health and safety protocols, which gave him 2 weeks of rest. Once he returned, he played his best basketball to that point, scoring 4 consecutive 30-plus point games and continuing his dominance into late January 2022. In late January 2022, James Harden missed 2 games due to persistent pain in his left hamstring. His superstar streak, which had resurged thanks to a prior break, was abruptly cut short when the same injury reared its head again. It was clear that Harden was a much more effective player with adequate rest periods, but the Philadelphia 76ers couldn't afford to leave their star on the bench for long. They needed wins, and Harden's presence on the court was crucial to keeping the team's playoff hopes alive. As the season progressed, Harden's performance slowly began to decline. Sixers coach Doug Rivers said in late March 2022 that Harden was not yet at 100% of his physical capacity. Despite this, the bearded man continued to play, aware that, although he was not in his best form, his participation was vital for Philadelphia to have a real chance at the playoffs. Harden finished the 2021-22 season averaging 22 points and 10 assists per game, with 41% field goal shooting and 33% three-point shooting. Although his numbers were down compared to previous seasons, he was still one of the league's most prominent passers. However, expectations for the playoffs were high, but they soon fell apart. In the first round of the 2022 playoffs, facing the Toronto Raptors, hopes for a championship quickly faded. Sixers superstar Joel Embiid suffered serious injuries to his thumb and orbital bone, significantly affecting his performance. With an injured Embiid and Harden unable to assume the necessary leadership, Philadelphia ceased to be a threat in the Eastern Conference. The Miami Heat, led by Jimmy Butler, eliminated the Sixers in 6 games, marking the end of a disappointing season. Through the 12 playoff games, Harden only managed to score more than 30 points on 1 occasion. This performance was well below his 30-point-per-game playoff averages from just 2 years earlier. The decline in his performance left fans perplexed, especially when just a few years earlier, Harden was criticized for being too aggressive when shooting. Now he found himself at the opposite extreme, displaying an alarming lack of aggression. Harden's future, which once seemed promising and unquestionable, was now filled with uncertainty. He had gone from being the league's leading scorer to a player who couldn't even average 20 points in the 2022 playoffs. This decline was the product of a combination of bad decisions and sheer bad luck. Harden had relied for years on his athletic ability and near unbreakable health to maintain his elite level. However, his bad habits, including his tendency to party, began to take their toll. The 2022-23 season was no more kind to Harden. Despite his move to the Philadelphia 76ers, expectations of a career renaissance did not fully materialize. Although he had standout moments and his partnership with Joel Embiid showed flashes of potential, inconsistencies and injuries continued to plague his performance. He averaged 21 points, 11 assists, and 6 rebounds per game. But the same concerns about his durability and work ethic persisted. The Sixers managed to reach the Eastern Conference semifinals, but were again eliminated, this time by the Boston Celtics in a tough series that went to Game 7. In the summer of 2023, discussions about Harden's future intensified. He decided to exercise his player option for the 2023-24 season with the Sixers, but speculation about a potential trade did not cease. Philadelphia was at a crossroads: keep Harden and risk another up-and-down season, or look for a new direction without him. For the 2023-24 season, Harden came in with a renewed mindset. He reported to training camp in better shape, determined to silence critics and prove he still had plenty of high-level basketball left to play. However, hamstring tightness issues resurfaced in December 2023, limiting his ability to play at the highest level. Despite these setbacks, the Sixers remained competitive in the Eastern Conference, thanks in large part to the dominant play of Joel Embiid and the development of young talents who provided depth to the team. Through mid-2024, Harden averaged 19 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds per game. His ability to distribute the ball remained a strength, but his explosiveness on the court had visibly diminished. The Sixers, under Embiid's leadership and Harden's experience, entered the playoffs hoping to go deep, but again encountered obstacles on their path to a championship. Harden showed flashes of his former greatness in several games, but consistency remained the issue. Harden's narrative throughout 2023 and 2024 was that of a player desperately seeking to regain his status among the NBA's elite while dealing with the passage of time and nagging injuries. Despite these challenges, Harden remained a relevant figure in the league with an uncertain future, but still with the ability to surprise everyone. Ultimately, Harden's fate and his legacy in the NBA depends on whether he can adapt to his physical limitations and remain an influential player. He is no longer the explosive scorer of years past, but with his vision and experience, he still has the potential to make a difference as long as he can stay healthy and motivated. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Leave us a comment with your opinion on James Harden's performance and what you think his future holds in the NBA. He can still be a superstar. We want to know what you think. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and other basketball fans. Your support helps us continue to create quality content.